This is a painting that's unusually, again for me and for this show, is very much drawn on a specific view. I live on Critch Island and I look out to the east to Mount Errigal and to the west from behind the house over to Arran Moor. And Arran Moor appears from us as a long flat island with a small pointy rock off the end of it. And this is a view of that island and rock from just behind a house along the track. But central to the painting is this triangular shape, which is predominantly red and then reaches a point on the rock on the end of Arran Moor in yellow with a little blue strip of sea between. And this painting also has a horizon in it, unusually for me, in that you've got the horizon of the top of the island and then you have the line of the sea which should continue across to the right of the painting. But the sea is falling away down the whole right-hand side of the painting, almost to the base of the triangle. And that is a compositional tool of mine to exaggerate the triangle. So it's called due west. It's about looking due west from where I live. But more than that, it's about the triangular shape and about the colour red and orange and yellow. And there's even some watery brushstrokes along the bottom, which accentuate the feeling for me of living right by the sea on a little island. And there's sea marks in the black scrapes, black or dark blue scrapes, in the sky or sea, however you see it, on the right of the painting. And some people have said to me, and I suppose I agree with them, that although this is a painting looking west from Critch of Arran Moor and a reddish land in the autumn, it's actually also a painting of Errigal because of the triangular form and because of Errigal always being in my mind's eye. These four here are all a series and actually part of a larger series, including some that aren't shown here. The first two, Solus 1 and Solus 2, well, in fact, all four started with bold, sweeping shapes in predominantly red. The canvas, the linen, was stapled to my wooden wall in pairs. So I have room for two of these at a time on the wall in my studio. So I will have worked on Solus 1 and 2 together and on Insight 1 and 2 together at right angles in my studio. And in all four cases, I put the red up first using a big rubber squeegee, and the stretched canvas stretched very taut, and I used the full stretch of my arm to make the marks. I'd like to say a bit about Solus 1 and 2 first, because they are key to the title of this whole show, which is Outside In. I was using the red in quite an angry way. Red is traditionally quite angry, and I put the black over the top of that, continuing that angry mood. It was at the beginning of the new surge of Black Lives Matter campaigns were happening, and George Floyd had just been killed. And I was really upset and really furious about that. Furious about his death and furious that such a thing could happen. And I used painting to express my emotion, but I couldn't really leave those black and red sweeps as the final painting because it's too angry, it's too upsetting, it's too emotional. So what I do is, after I've painted something like that, I put new, softer layers over the top and gradually bring the calming nature of my surroundings into the painting. So you will see in all four of these that you start off with a very bold, strong movement of red or red and black, and then gradually there's more pastel colours that come over the top, again using a squeegee but also a roller, and smoother, more gentle colours come over the top. And then finally, in the last stages of the work, I scrape through little wiggly lines that are suggestive of our wonderful horizon of the Seven Sisters in Donegal. So there's a bit of Muckish and a bit of the Achlas and a bit of Errigal in there. And they're marked through the top surface of the paint, through to the undersurface. And then finally, my thumbprint with one of the last colours I use usually, put in the bottom right-hand corner, and my initials LD scratched into it. So you have 4 angry paintings here that turned into approachable, soft, pastel landscape paintings. So I've brought the outside into my soul, if you like, and into the painting. Insight 2 has another compositional feature. In addition to the wiggly line of the Seven Sisters horizon, there's also an unusual, for me, lens shape. I don't know how else to describe it, but an oval or sideways eye through nearly the middle of the painting. And for me, that helped me draw myself into the centre of the work and therefore draw the viewer's eye into the centre of the work to give it more depth. It's a compositional tool, I suppose, but it also adds to the energy and the emotional content, I think, of the painting. So you can look into the mountains, you can look perhaps deeper into where I was when I painted them. These are quite different from most of the other work in the show. They've got very specific shapes, and it's very hard to explain why. It came to me, particularly starting with Unsettled Ground 1, that the painting that I'd already made, which was quite simply a blue background and a pyramid shape, I probably made it end of last year or possibly very early this year. And then I was away for about 10 weeks in Wales with my daughter, who isn't well. And I came back to Ireland after being away, and I was quite personally unsettled. And this painting here, Unsettled Ground 1, has a shape in it which to me talks about stability. The pyramid, triangle, is on a very secure base. It's quite often used, the pyramid and the triangle, as a spiritual symbol, a symbol for the earth, and sometimes in some societies a symbol for God, and certainly for spirit. And so I use a triangle quite often, just unconsciously working away and then find that I want to put a triangle shape in. But this one I reworked in June to add all these squiggly black shapes. And at the same time, I took 2 other paintings, Unsettled Ground 2 and 3, which were already abstract paintings with black and orange shapes in them, but the background was fairly flat. So both the 2 smaller ones and the large one in this Unsettled Ground series, I worked into them with these squiggly black shapes, almost like Egyptian hieroglyphics or a bit like a language, and also some of these very strong orange brush marks into the triangle and highlighting the abstract shapes in the 2 smaller ones. And I put all that in June this year, and it helped me express my unsettledness. And the triangle became very much more a pyramid. And I wonder, I don't know, I often don't know, I wonder if I was trying to find some ground again, some stability. I'd come home from being away with a sick daughter, and of course in the midst of a pandemic, I'd worn my mask for the first time on the ferry. I was very anxious about the journey with the pandemic, and coming home to Critch Island, I was looking for some stability, and I think that shows some of that. Unsettled Ground 2 and 3. These 2 appeal to me for perhaps a more technical reason. They have quite strong contrasts of tone, and you can look at that by taking a photo on your phone and then looking at it in black and white. And you'll see that there are quite strong contrasts in these two paintings, which makes them perhaps easier to see and easier to understand, even though they're abstract, because your eye moves around them comfortably. I also like them because of the blue and orange, which are complementary colours, that strong blue and that bright orange, which also give them an added layer of interest. I had a place at Kilraelig Art Residency down in County Kerry, and I specifically asked for a cottage with big enough space to paint these two large works because I wanted to challenge myself. I've never done anything quite as long as that, and my studio hasn't got a wall big enough to paint that size. So I thought, well, I'll take the opportunity on my residency in Kilraelig to paint a couple of really big ones and to use the setting but not to paint it specifically. So the cottage is on the cliffs above Ballinskellig's Bay, looking out to sea with little rocky islands. And it's right up on the cliff, and it's very remote and very windy and wild. And I wanted to try and capture some of that without painting the horizon. Almost everybody who paints landscapes or views has a clear horizon somewhere in the painting. And I wanted to avoid that because I wanted to get the feeling of the place. I wanted to get a feel of the width and the space and the enormity of being on a cliff above the sea and knowing that you're on the edge of the world with the whole Atlantic beyond you. And so in this first one, How Wide the Sky, I used the reflected light on the water as a central image. So it's sky and sea combined. And the two blocks of colour are similar but not identical. And those two blocks of colour were the last things that went on this painting. Both of these paintings had solid colours on their first layers. So How Wide the Sky was an ochre yellow type of colour, and you can see that underneath the purple and through the purple in the left-hand corner of the painting, and also all the way through in the scratches and scrapes. This is called scruffito, and you can see where I've scraped through the blue. In the middle of the painting there's scratched, scraped arc shapes done with a palette knife, and I've scraped through the lilac and the yellow and the blue through to the yellow ochre underneath. And you can see that in various parts of the canvas, but particularly middle right, and you can see quite a lot of the yellow, the bottom left as well. With the red one, it's more patchily throughout, so you can see splashes of red that look a bit like they're splashes of red on the surface, but actually they're revealed sections of red from the base coat. These two are each about 12 foot long, and they're cut very raggedly down the bottom from the same piece. So it was one piece of acrylic primed linen, 12 feet long and about 6 feet wide. These four smallish works on panel have similar mood, and they're probably more based, more founded in actual landscape than any of the others in the show, apart from possibly the mountain one. Small Landscape 1 and Small Landscape 2 were made in County Kerry, and they have small references within them to geographical features, is the best way of putting it, I suppose. Small Landscape 1 has a small mountain or island in the top third, which could be interpreted as Errigal, because Errigal often appears in my paintings, even if I'm not painting in Donegal, just the iconic triangular shape. But actually, I think at the time when I was painting this one, I was looking at one of the islands out in Ballinskellig's Bay. And the lower one, Small Landscape 2, similarly has small scratched shapes within it, which could perhaps be muckish or could again be an island out in the sea. And I find that quite interesting that those shapes can transpose into different landscapes. And the other two, predominantly green works with a bit of pink. Contours has some orange as a base coat. It has a base coat that was completely orange, and you can see the orange coming through in scraped areas. And both of them were made in Donegal, and they're on birch panel that's been primed with gesso and then painted in several layers of oil and cold wax medium. And then the marks in these two, I think possibly the only two in the show, are made with graphite stick. So the black marks have been put in over the top of a scratch. So I've scraped through with a palette knife and then marked the scrapes with a stick of black graphite to reference my local landscape. Quite pleased with those two. Yeah, and I do quite a lot of that work. It comes easily to me. So these two little ones are a bit of a change in my work. They're very abstract, as you can see. There's mostly only two colours, just that slate grey and a limey sort of green. There's perhaps a little bit of a paler yellow in the left-hand one, in Kerry 1. But mostly they are abstract shapes on small wooden squares. And I made them on my residency in County Kerry in August. And they do reference my surroundings, because I was quite struck by how the gable ends of the cottages stood out against the sky in a very sharp form, a bit like you see in the top right of Kerry 1 and the middle bottom of Kerry 2. And the green is very much, for me anyway, a colour of grass. But the reason they're different is because they are so purely abstract, and they are fundamentally only two colours. And I like that, and I'm thinking that my next group of works on panel may well move more towards that idea of a transparent, bold colour and a neutral, darker shade in just 2 or 3 forms, whether it's a small piece or a large piece.